everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do the books that I read while I was on vacation in France. Now I have no idea when you're going to see this video because, as I've mentioned a few times on my channel, I've been having a lot of computer issues, and the computer issue is that my computer struggles to connect to the internet. So my phone is fine, which means that it's not a router issue, but I've already changed the internet network card on my computer. I've already switched that out. I've done several different types of reboots. I think one was called like a DMC reboot or not DMF, that's dimethylfluoride. But like this, I've done certain reboots. Every time a new problem comes, I go to YouTube, I look up a great tutor and they fix the problem for me. I've done all those things, but over and over again, my computer works for like a few days or a week, and then it goes right back to where it was. And it seems right now that every time I want to post to YouTube is when my computer decides to not connect to the internet anymore. So I can upload the video to YouTube via my phone, but I can't edit it afterwards. And I'm not just going to give you the raw footage with no editing. So I have no idea when you're going to see this, but that's basically why my schedule is so irregular these days, because every time I want to update or post to YouTube, my computer decides, haha, no, you're not going to. I'm going to make sure I can't connect to the internet. But every time I'm just like, I have nothing else to do, and I think maybe I'll watch one YouTube video. At that time, my computer works just fine. So yeah, computer's playing mind games, and it is what it is. I don't know what to do. My computer it's not old, so I don't want to replace it because it's a good computer. It's just for some reason the internet keeps screwing up. I don't know what to do. If you have recommendations, let me know. But while I was on vacation, so I was in France for 3 weeks, I kind of took some time off. I kind of relaxed, so I only have 4 books for you compared to probably what most people would think you could read in 3 weeks on vacation. Let me start with the very first book, which I read in English and recently hauled just before even on vacation. And that book is the nonfiction, The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. This was fantastic. This was so informative, so invigorating in terms of invigorating your desire to read and to turn your page. It is frustrating in terms of the content and realizing what was going on, or not realizing, but just having it written down for you or confirming things. It was not hopeful whatsoever. It's definitely not hopeful at all. It's not hopeful for any change, but it is so informative, and it's so well written, and it's so well done. Now, what is this book about other than just reading the subtitle? It's basically, the idea is presenting you evidence, all the different evidence of how the government and people in government, politicians or state boards, community leaders, community members, used the law to segregate black Americans, which hindered their lives in a way that it made it very difficult for them to participate in society, and basically to gain wealth in society. So because of these laws, because of all these loopholes, because of all these manipulations within the government, the Black Americans were segregated from the white communities. Now, the argument that Richard Rothstein, the author, makes, because he doesn't just want to show you how they were segregated. He doesn't want to only show you how they were segregated or why they were segregated, in what methods they were segregated. He wanted to give proof that the government was very much aware that their laws were being used for segregation, so that Black Americans would be aware that they were segregated by law and not just by private practice. And there's a difference. So basically he says, in current society, a lot of people, when they complain about, say, the ghettos, about Black Americans, are just perpetuating their own stereotypes because of their culture, because they're innately bad people. Their culture is innately violent, or they discourage each other, which is why they're poor. They commit violence against each other, which is why they remain poor. They commit violence against white communities, which again is why they remain poor. And if they are discriminated against via a white person or anybody else who's just not Black, people will say, well, that's just that individual's racism towards Black people. And so that's just, you can't control that. That's just, a fact of matter. And so if someone privately used methods to segregate a Black community, well, that's just, you can't do anything about that. And so that is considered what is written in this text as de facto segregation. And what Richard Rothstein wants to say is that it turns out that the segregation was not de facto. It wasn't via private practice. It was instead, segregation was intentional, and it was intentionally done by government action, which means that it's not de facto segregation. It is what we would call de jure segregation, which means that because it's segregation by law and public policy, that means that it was done illegally, and more so than it was done illegally, it was done unconstitutionally, which means that if laws were Black people were segregated in an unconstitutional way, that it is their constitutional right to be to be rewarded, to be given amends for that unconstitutional behavior. So that's the argument he is making in this book. And it's really, really just so well done. He goes through every single aspect of the that Black Americans had to go through when it came to the idea of public housing, the ghettos, racial zoning, how they were prevented from owning their own home. When they were allowed to give their own, when they were finally allowed to have their own homes, then the government would manipulate loans, the type of loans they could get. If they were finally able to get a loan, so then the government would manipulate the high interest rates for them. Or it would be a loan with so much back information that no one could really follow those policies. But if you were to read the contract carefully, it turned out they were getting screwed in every single way. It talks about how the government manipulated white communities' perception of Black communities. For example, if a Black family were to move into a white community, politicians or leaders of the group or HOA boards or school boards would come to the white communities and say, you definitely do not want a Black family here. They will ruin your neighborhood. They will, violence will come, rape will come, they won't take care of their own properties, etc., etc. So they used all these arguments with the white communities to also, again, create enough of a movement for people to want to separate out or to push out the Black families. So it just gives example after example of every single way that Black Americans were prevented from living like a proper citizen who does want to create wealth, and who does want to be able to properly maintain their homes, and does want to be able to properly send their children to schools, who does want to properly participate in a community and do well and make friends and create relationships with people. But they were prevented in every single way just based off of their race. And the thing that's interesting, not in a haha way or in a I didn't know that at all what kind of way, but just sort of compounds all this information, is the fact that these government officials, these people with power, would do everything they can to persuade people that Black people were violent, didn't maintain their properties, were dumb and were poor and couldn't do anything, and they were just horrible people. And the thing is that the white communities basically created that themselves. So they're the ones that created circumstances where Black people, Black Americans could only live in poor communities. They created circumstances where Black Americans couldn't receive a good education. They recreated circumstances where Black Americans couldn't create wealth. So they just put all these issues on the Black communities and then blame them for it. So that's what this book's about. And it's just so well done in the sense that I think it's a book that all Americans should read and could read to better understand why it's not the Black community's fault that their communities are the way they are. They were just made that way, basically. I mean, the white communities created this for Black communities, so you can't blame them. And then I think this book is also excellent for non-Americans. I think it's excellent for people who are not Americans, who want to understand why the race issues are so, or what they are in the US, because it's not, the racism in the US is not the same as racism in US, in Europe, or in like Japan or other countries. Racism has many different forms, but I do think the North American, the US version of racism is very particular, it's very different, and it has a very particular history to it, which explains the current situation in the US. And so I think this book makes that all very well understandable, even if you're not an American, because he just makes this so clear. He writes this in such a way that it's so understandable. If there's any sort of word that he thinks might be difficult to understand, like any legalese, any words about how system works, he explains it very well. He does not assume that you have previous law knowledge. He explains this in a way that any layman can understand this. And for me, I think this book is so excellent and so readable and so understandable that I think this book would be perfect for middle schools and high schools to read. I think there are so many amazing excerpts. I mean, if I were someone who highlights books, this whole book would be yellow, basically, because there are so many, like, yes, exactly this. Oh, I need to remember how you explain this. Oh, I really want to share this. There are so many points in this book that highlight all the issues in such a easily understandable manner that I think I really do think excerpts should be taken from this and taught in class in the US in middle schools and high schools, because any level can understand this, and it will help in understanding the history of the US, and it really will help in understanding the present times of the US, and will give you an insight into the future of the US if we continue in this direction. Now, my only problem with this book isn't even really a problem, because he addresses it himself. There's in the last few chapters, when he talks about giving amends, how do you fix the situation? How do you create a new system where Black Americans can rise up and leave these communities? And he says himself that he does not dare to suggest ways to give amends, because the amends would not be for him. So it's up to the Black Americans to state what they need, what they want, and how they're going to get it. He says it's not his place to figure that out, which I can understand that, but I think there's still ways he could do a little bit more on that. And he does end up giving a chapter called Considering Fixes, and he does give certain ideas and certain things that would possibly work. But at the same time, when he does that, some of his ideas are so far-fetched and basically impossible that I think instead of considering fixes, it would have been better for him to suggest just entirely new policies. But it's very difficult. It's not an easy, I mean, you'll read this book and you'll understand it. It's not an easy situation to fix, but because it took decades and decades of American policy to bring down the Black American community. So it's not something you can fix overnight. It's, I mean, generations of Black families were brought down and prevented from gaining wealth and status and societal respectability, and they were prevented from getting good jobs and creating careers. They were preventing from giving their children proper education when they wanted to give their children proper education. And so it's just, it created this snowball effect where you just can't get out of it. And so there needed to be a bit more on that side, and he does, but he does admit he was weaker with that, and because he doesn't exactly know how you could fix this situation. But I really appreciated his frequently asked questions section, because this book has been published for a while, and so the frequently asked question passage comes from about a decade later, where people discuss certain aspects of his book, and he does address them, and either he agrees with the frequently asked question or he disagrees with them, but he explains why he disagrees with them. And I think that is very good. I think it's excellent that he is able to acknowledge parts where he was maybe weaker, but he is also able to double down on the parts where he's like, no, I think I'm correct in saying this, and this is why. Also, I think his acknowledgments section, it's about 10 pages long. I read every single word about it because I think he shows how grateful he is to the help he has received. And I just think that shows that he's a good person who actually is definitely caring and wants something to happen for all these communities. And I just think it shows his genuine care. Also, I love the part where he gives acknowledgement to the cover designer, because I have to say the cover design is definitely a huge reason why I purchased this book, because I think it's brilliant. Having the map showing the racial zoning that was occurring, I think is just beautiful. The use of color is fantastic, and I think just his acknowledgement of that, and the fact that because of for example, the design of the book, it just made it more attractive to gain more readers that needed to buy this. And I think that was very good of him to present, because it's true. The cover designer just did an amazing job with this book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think this is a must read, incredible, absolutely, and just a must read. So yeah, definitely pick that up. Next, I have 3 books that I read in French, although one of them is a book that was translated from the English, so I'll start with that one. And that is the book Le Jardinier Espagnol, The Spanish Gardener, by A.J. Cronin, who is actually a Scottish author. This is one of those books that I bought because I was saving it from the shelf, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But I bought this in Japan at a used bookstore, and I knew nothing about it, but I thought I needed to save it. And I am so happy that I finally read this, because this was heartbreaking but also delightful at the same time. Le Jardinier Espagnol talks, or I should say it in English because it's originally written in English. The Spanish Gardener is about a father and son relationship at its core. Basically, this father is an American diplomat who has just been transferred from the established Paris embassy in Paris to a small rural town in Spain, and he considers that a step down in his career. Now, his ego has been has taken a knock because of that. He really thinks he's a really dignified person with a very intelligent, worthy of an amazing career, worthy of being in the top ambassadorship areas in any major city. And so he takes this as a knock to his ego. This compounded with the fact that he had a failed marriage with his first wife, which means that his ego was already quite fragile. He has created a sort of toxic bond to his only son. Now, he loves his son, the love is genuine, but it is quite toxic. And so upon moving to this new estate in Spain, when his son creates this beautiful relationship with the gardener, the father decides that he is going to destroy this relationship because he cannot share the love of his son with anybody else. Now, in the meantime, in the background, there is someone in the house that is plotting something quite nefarious in the home, and everything is going to just go into tragedy. It's basically as tragic as Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. So if you know about that, this is just, you know, something is coming. It's there. It's you're feeling that this can only go in one direction, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. This was just also delightful to read because it's beautifully written. I think there's an ease to the reading of this that just, despite knowing the tragedy was coming, you felt safe, and you just needed to know more about the characters because they're all very well established. So this was a delightful, pleasant read by an author I know nothing about, I have no history with, and this was just sort of one of those serendipitous finds in a bookstore, and I think this was beautiful. Very good, easy read. Now, the other book that I read is very exciting because this is the book that I bought at the same time as this. So basically what I was talking about, how I was saving this book from the bookshelf. Basically in Tokyo, the major used bookstore in all of Japan is called Book Off. And it's everywhere and it's amazing. But the foreign book selection is always quite meager. It's usually old textbooks from like the 80s, where back then you were taught how to ask for cigarettes all the time because they assumed people learning Japanese were people who were just learning Japanese for business reasons. And businessmen in 1980s were heavy cigarette smokers, especially in Japan. So it's all about how to ask for cigarettes, how to go to a hotel, how to ask for alcohol, etc., etc. So it's just these old textbooks that no one uses. Or it's like John Grisham books, so just Tom Clancy books, which if you like those books, you have a great selection. But for those of us who want to read something else, and you only see that every single time, it's a little bit tiring. Or the third option is like 50 Shades of Grey or Twilight, which again, for me personally, I just don't want to read those books. And even if I wanted to, I probably would have already read them by now, and I don't need to see the same copies over and over again in every single used bookstore. So when I saw these on the shelf, this book is by Henri Troyat, who is an author I've already read and had really enjoyed. So when I saw this book, I knew I wanted to buy this. And also, it's in these Livre de Poche old 1950s, 1960s editions that don't have the blurb on them. And I just absolutely love these editions. They smell good. They smell like dust. I love it. They smell just wonderful to me. And yeah, this was just like, I have to buy this. But then this was right next to it, and I thought, what are the likelihoods of another French person coming into this bookstore and wanting to buy this very specific book? So I ended up buying these together because they're only 100 yen each. And actually it was cheaper. I think it was only 50 yen because the bookstore was closing. So I got everything for a discount. So I decided to save this one as well. And again, I'm so happy I bought this. Now, in another interesting turn of events, this is also about a father-son relationship. So the title of this book is called Faux-jour, which is a little bit hard to translate. Faux-jour means like kind of like manipulation, like miscreant manipulation, like con kind of thing. I don't know if I'm explaining it so well, but again, I was going to look up the definition on the internet before starting this video and I couldn't. So yeah, and then my camera is my phone, so I can't look it up on my phone while I'm filming to check up on you. It's a whole thing. It's a whole dilemma. It's very inconvenient. But Faux-jour is a father-son relationship where basically in the very first chapter you get this very beautiful Christmas time moment where the son is looking at his father performing magic tricks for the children, and he knows that the son looks at the magic tricks and he's like, they're magic tricks, it's all fake, it's just sleight of hand, it's not real magic, but it's my father doing it, and it's heartwarming and it's beautiful. And that basically gives you the plot of the book. So basically the father goes to the America to look for a job. His son is placed with his aunt, And when his father finally comes back to America, he picks up his son so that they can live together. And the son is so happy to be back with his father and to reconnect with his it's just beloved father. But little and little, he discovers that his father is not the man he thought he was. Basically, just like the magic tricks with the sleight of hand, he realized his father is actually a con man, a man who manipulates people. He's a man who's looking for the easy money. He tries to establish businesses that kind of are based off of nothing, and he doesn't establish the businesses out of passion. He establishes the business because he thinks it's going to be a quick turnaround, it's going to be easy to make, easy to sell, they're going to make their fortune, and then he borrows money heavily from other people, and all his father's friends are also equally con men, or they're easily people who can be deceived. And just little by little, this son discovers his father's true nature, and he has to come to the decision about how he feels about that. And this was just another really great little book. Henri Troyat, I really enjoy. He's one of those kind of forgotten French authors, especially when it comes, I mean, even within France, I would say he's fairly forgotten, but maybe my French viewers can correct me on that if they think differently. But definitely in terms of reading French literature from a non-France perspective, people know the classics. They know Victor Hugo, they know Alexandre Dumas, they know Sartre, they know Voltaire, they know Proust because, oh, Proust, right? But when it comes to slightly more modern, more contemporary, this isn't contemporary, but more modern fiction, when it comes to those French authors, they don't have the reputation that the classics do. And so I think they're very much less known. And Henri Troyat for me is just one of those authors who's very, very easy to read, very smooth writing. Just know you'll never be like, ooh, that turn of phrase is slightly strange. You'll never think that. You'll just go through the story and just go with the emotions, because that's what he brings. His favorite book of mine, which is his most famous book, is La Neige en Deuil, which is sort of the Snow in Mourning. Now, it does have a different title in English because that book has been translated in English, but it is so old and so unknown that you can only buy it used. It would need to be republished, which I think it needs to be republished by, you know, the Penguin classics, the blue ones, the modern Penguin classics, that either do the blue or the white cover. They would be amazing. They should definitely republish that book. But yeah, Henri Troyat is definitely an author that I very much enjoy, and I think he needs to have a little bit of a resurgence. The last book that I read is called Colline, Hill, by Giono. Once again, another one of those French authors who is this one, however, is well known in France, very well known in France, but just maybe not as well known outside of France. But Jean Giono is also an author that technically it's my first full read book of his. I tried to read his most famous book, Un roi sans divertissement. I tried, that also has a different title in English. I don't know how they translate it. But I had tried reading that book at one point. I think it's like 270 pages or so. I got to page 100. And when I was reading that book, I realized that I was feeling emotions with the book. I was feeling the beauty of the writing, but I wasn't absorbing the story or what was going on. Which, to admit, there isn't too much story, but there was enough of a story that I wasn't picking up on. So I had to put that book down. But I always said there was something about that writing that was so beautiful that I wanted to tackle him again. So when I was in France, I had the choice to try and reread that book or read something different. And this one, when I flipped to it, it was very sparse. The paragraphs you can see there's like a lot of blank space. And so I thought this would be a better, easier book to start with. I just thought it would give me a better feel for his writing, perhaps. And I was right, because it turns out this is the first book he's ever published. So this is Colline, called The Hill. And this was beautiful and quite haunting and complex, but simple at the same time. It's very hard to describe. Basically, this book is about a small village in the hills in a particular region of France. I saw online that it's supposed to be Provence, but I don't know Provence enough to be able to state that myself. And because there's no blurb to tell me that's Provence, I'm just going to say a certain region in France that is not named, just like the name of the town is not named. Or is it? I don't remember. Sorry. In any case, it's about a small community that is just typical. Everyone has their own little hardships, but the hardships are typical of the region. But things are more or less quite prosperous, and people are doing well in their little town. Until one day, the father figure of one of the homes comes down with an illness, and the doctor comes and is told that he needs to be basically bedridden, prevented from drinking alcohol, and just allowed to rest until basically he ends up passing away. Basically, it's been saying that this is his end of the life. You just need to make things comfortable with him. But if you want to slow down the dying process, you need him to get off alcohol. And since that moment, there have been strange omens, like not being able to shoot at a boar. The boar was escaped. There's a black cat that keeps coming in and out of the house. And little by little things start to happen. For example, the fountain, the fountain, which is the only water source of the village, no longer spouts water. There's the daughter of one of the families starts to act a little strangely. The boy who is mentally handicapped, sorry, I don't know the PC words for all this stuff anymore. I can't keep up with the US. It changes all the time. So mentally handicapped, the boy that is mentally handicapped has been sneaking out at night, etc., etc. And there's an unease in the village, and people don't understand where it's coming. And this book focuses on two men of two different households. One is the son-in-law of the ill man, and the other man is part of another family. But they are sort of the main two heads of this town. They're kind of the leaders, and they have sort of certain different ideas of what's going on and how they want to tackle this. But there's definitely an unease in the village, and superstition starts to come about. And people are starting to think that nature is taking revenge on them, but then one man is wondering if it's not the old man in bed who is taking revenge on the town. And yeah, this was just a beautiful, beautiful story told in a type of writing, which is the part where I said it's simple but complex. I admittedly struggled at the beginning of this paragraph to get my footing, not paragraph, the beginning of this book, getting a good solid footing onto Giono's writing. There's something about his writing that I just can't catch on, but it's beautiful. Now, I did end up catching on, and again, I thought it was beautiful all throughout, but just the beginning I found very difficult. And I wonder if part of it is because I read such descriptive books, especially lately. I read books that describe everything, and a lot of times the more the description, the more I love it. But he is very selective with all his words. He can create a scene in a way that is just truly marvelous, but without using that many words. But the words he does use can be a little bit more on the difficult side. And the pairing is always very interesting, the way he puts words together. And it's just really fantastic. But it did take me a while to get used to. But yeah, this book was just beautiful. It was just really, really well done. And so yeah, I really like this. And this does have it is technically part of a trilogy, which you will see in my book haul in the next video, whenever that comes out, depending on how whether my internet loves me or hates me that day. So it does have two sequels that I read. However, this stands by itself. I could have just finished this and I would be happy. It just happened that we own these books at home, so I decided to just grab them while I was there. But this does stand alone by itself. However, the entire trilogy does exist in English translation. So if you're interested in this, you can read it. So yeah, those are the 4 books that I read in France. It was a very lovely vacation. Lots of eating good food. Lots of just chilling. I practiced my violin a lot. I read when I felt like reading. And I did a lot of beautiful hiking in the beautiful Alps. And I got to hang out with my mom. And then I got to see my grandmother in Paris. And it was just a very delightful 3-week vacation. and I've been back for a while, and I am going to leave for the beach now because it's still beach season in Japan and I love it. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!